Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, we pull back the veil on one of history's most terrifying and enduring symbols of cruelty, the Iron Maiden. The very name conjures chilling images of a human-sized sarcophagus, its interior lined with razor-sharp spikes designed to inflict a slow, agonizing death. It's a device that has permeated our collective imagination, featuring prominently in movies, books, and even heavy metal music, cementing its fearsome reputation as a pinnacle of medieval barbarity. But what if I told you that this iconic symbol, this supposed ultimate medieval punishment, is largely a phantom? The myth's gruesome design and purported victims. Let's first paint the picture as popular culture has ingrained it. Imagine being forced into this upright coffin. Its two heavy doors would then slowly creak shut, plunging you into complete darkness. The spikes, meticulously arranged, were supposedly designed to pierce your body without immediately striking vital organs. Like the heart or lungs, the goal wasn't a quick death, but a prolonged agony as you slowly bled out from multiple piercing wounds, making great cries and laments for hours. Even days, it was pain by design. Death by inches, the story claims it was used on heretics, witches, rebels, and traitors to the state or church. Across Europe, particularly in Germany, in times of religious conflict, even a whisper of blasphemy could seal a person's fate. Inside the steel tomb, their agony echoing off the steel walls. With no witnesses, this horrifying image has been so powerfully painted that it's deeply ingrained in our public consciousness. But here's where our story takes a stunning and unexpected turn. Despite its pervasive presence in popular culture, rigorous historical inquiry reveals that the Iron Maiden did not actually exist during the medieval period. Historians who scoured medieval court records, manuscripts, and legal documents for evidence of this terrifying device found not a single authenticated historical record of an Iron Maiden ever being used for torture or execution. The Iron Maiden appeared in history books much later, not until the 1800s. In reality, the Iron Maiden was invented by an 18th century historian who believed his own time to be superior, using it as the focal point of a hoax intended to cast shade on the medieval period. The very first recorded reference came from the writings of German philosopher Johann Philipp Siebeke in 1799. He detailed a fictional account of a coin forger's execution in 1515, Nuremberg, describing it in gruesome, vivid detail for a guidebook to the city. This dubious and dramatic account was essentially a sensationalized, possibly invented story designed for popular consumption. What some might call portage. This morbidly fascinating fiction caught the attention of Victorian collector Matthew Peacock. Inspired by the myth, Peacock built a functional version of the Iron Maiden from bits of memorabilia he'd collected and sold this invention to a museum. Visitors marveled at the device, believing it to be real, and word of its supposed dark origin spread, perpetuating the legend. This was a deliberate construction for entertainment and profit, commodifying historical brutality for public consumption. By the 19th century, Iron Maidens began to appear across Europe and the United States, along with gruesome tales of their use. The most famous example, the Iron Maiden of Nuremberg, initially known as the Nuremberg Virgin, was likely constructed around 1802, placing its creation firmly outside the medieval era. This original device was reportedly lost during the Allied bombing of Nuremberg in 1944 or 1945, but a copy was auctioned off in the 1960s and is now displayed at the Medieval Crime Museum Rothenburg. These museum pieces were often pieced together from various artifacts to create spectacular objects for commercial exhibition. While the Iron Maiden itself is a modern fabrication, the idea of torturing people with spikes or using confining devices goes way back. The myth isn't a complete invention, but appears to be a synthesis of various historical and literary elements. For example, the Greek historian Polybius, around 100 BCE, described a reverse version of the Iron Maiden. The Spartan tyrant Nabis created a statue of his wife, a pega covered in iron nails. When people refused to pay taxes, Nabis would force them to embrace the statue, making them say anything and everything, and by this means, he killed a considerable number of those who denied him money. Another similar device appeared in St. Augustine's 5th century book, The City of God, describing the torture of Roman general Marcus Atilius Regulus by the Carthaginians. He was shut in a narrow box lined with finely sharpened nails, unable to lean without intense pain, and ultimately died from sleep deprivation. While similar, the nails didn't actually pierce him, and there's little evidence this device truly existed. The Abbasid Vizier Ibn al-Zayyat, 9th century ad, is also said to have created a wooden, oven-like chest that had iron spikes for torture. Furthermore, the 19th century, Iron Maidens may have been constructed as a misinterpretation or exaggeration of the medieval Schandmantel, or code of shame. This was a genuine medieval punishment device, a barrel-like or cloak device made of wooden metal, used for public humiliation, resembling a pillory or stocks. However, it lacked internal spikes and was not intended to kill the victim. This suggests a transformation of a real, medieval punishment device into a more horrific, fabricated form, drawing on fragmented and distorted historical elements to create a new narrative that resonated with public fascination. The question of victims and bans, given its nature as a fabrication, the mythical Iron Maiden has no real victims from the medieval period, nor does it have a date of when it was banned, because it was never used as a widespread torture device. The Middle Ages were indeed brutal, and many other real and horrifying methods of torture existed, such as the rack or water torture, but the Iron Maiden was simply not one of them. It's crucial to understand that the Iron Maiden primarily served a psychological purpose. Imagine being shown such a coffin before interrogation. The imagined shrieking echo of a prisoner's cries could be enough to force confessions before a single drop of blood was spilled. Fear, after all, was the real tool of torture. By the late 19th century, as human rights revolutions swept through Europe, the use of torture devices, including symbolic ones like the Iron Maiden, became banned and condemned as part of prison reform. Enlightened thinkers pushed for legality over brutality, turning the Iron Maiden into a terrifying chapter of what we believed was it crushed spirits with its legend, not bodies. A chilling modern exception. While its medieval use is overwhelmingly mythical, there is one rare documented instance of an Iron Maiden-like device, discovered in modern times in 2003, following the death of Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein's murderous son. Uday Hussein, a device resembling an Iron Maiden, was found at the Iraqi National Olympic Committee compound. Uday Hussein was notorious for his cruelty, regularly torturing poor-performing athletes. A 2003 report from Time magazine journalist Bobby Goosh stated that the device found in Baghdad was clearly worn from use, its nails having lost some of their sharpness. It lay on its side within view of Uday's offices, while no blood was found on the device, suggesting it may have only been there to scare and intimidate. Uday Hussein's penchant for causing harm makes it entirely likely he used it for its intended cruel purpose. This modern instance serves as a chilling reminder that, while the medieval narrative was fabricated, the archetype of extreme confining and psychologically terrifying torture is not confined to historical fantasy. The true death inside a steel coffin, the iron coffin. The query for this report also mentions steel coffins, which leads us to a fascinating and very real historical narrative, entirely distinct from the mythical torture device. In stark contrast to the Iron Maiden myth, iron coffins, also known as metallic burial cases, were genuine 19th century innovations. These were not instruments of torture, but were designed for sanitary preservation and transportation of the deceased, driven by technological advancements and evolving societal needs. They were airtight, form-fitting metallic cases, sometimes with a glass viewing window. A compelling example of their practical utility is the forensic investigation of the woman in the iron coffin. On October 4th, 2011, construction workers in Queens, New York made an astonishing discovery: a remarkably well-preserved body, encased in an elaborate and expensive iron coffin. Due to the body's unusual preservation, it was initially mistaken for a recent homicide victim. Forensic archaeologist Scott Warnash and his team determined the body belonged to a young African-American woman, remarkably preserved due to the coffin's airtight design. Through meticulous research, she was identified as Martha Peterson, a 26-year-old African-American woman who had died from smallpox around 1850. Her reburial ceremony took place in November 2016. This investigation not only identified the woman, but also revealed a vivid picture of life for free African-American people in the North before the Civil War, with a coffin becoming a unique historical archive. The visionary innovator behind these airtight, iron coffins was Almond Dunbar Fisk, a Manhattan stove designer, who received a patent for his metallic burial case. On November 14, 1848, his invention was a direct response to a personal tragedy, the death of his brother in 1844, and the lack of a practical way to transport his body for proper burial in an era before refrigeration or modern embalming. Fisk skillfully redirected his mastery of cast iron from airtight stoves to these groundbreaking burial cases. Fisk's metallic burial cases served multiple purposes: to naturally preserve bodies by being airtight and minimizing oxygen for decomposition, to allow bodies to be safely and sanitarily transported long distances for legal identification, and to quarantine the remains of victims of contagious diseases. Like cholera, they even served as a deterrent against grave robbers. These expensive coffins were primarily used by the wealthy and elite, becoming a status symbol with figures like Dolly Madison, Zachary Taylor, Abraham Lincoln, and his son Willie laid out in them. Fisk's invention marked the beginning of a trend away from wood coffins and is credited as the progenitor of the metal caskets used today. Conclusion: fact versus fiction. The phrase Iron Maiden death inside a steel coffin ultimately reveals two profoundly different historical narratives, united only by a superficial similarity in terminology. The Iron Maiden torture device is overwhelmingly a product of 18th and 19th century sensationalism and popular imagination, largely lacking historical evidence of widespread medieval use. It is a phantom history's most successful ghost, a lie repeated so many times it became accepted as truth. Conversely, the iron coffin was a legitimate and innovative 19th century burial technology designed to address practical and spiritual challenges. As vividly illustrated by the case of Martha Peterson, the true death inside a steel coffin was not a form of torture, but a carefully managed, dignified burial in an era of significant change, reflecting a technological adaptation to profound human experiences. The Iron Maiden's persistence in popular culture underscores how compelling narratives, even if fictional, can overshadow historical fact, particularly when they tap into deep-seated fears or fascinations. With the darker side of history, it stands as a warning, shaped in iron of the thin line between justice and cruelty, guilt and suspicion, fact and belief. What other historical myths do you think might hide a surprising truth? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, so you don't miss our next deep dive into the fascinating world of weird history.